We got a major move coming for crypto. And what I'm talking about is on the Bitcoin chart here, because Bitcoin is still the driver of this crypto market. If Bitcoin has more room to pump, so will a lot of these altcoins here. However, if Bitcoin starts dumping from here, which it still has a risk of, because it still broke down from a huge bearish rising wedge pattern, and it still has a risk of breaking down to that breakdown target. That is going to be very bad for the altcoins here. Okay. Now we do have a major event happening tomorrow, October 29th, which is the FOMC meeting. And for this FOMC meeting, there is a lot more bullish price action going into the meeting because, well, my theory is because we already have a pretty good, probability of that the Fed is continuing to lower rates for this meeting. According to the CME Watch tool here, okay, we have been monitoring this, and if you guys have been following my channel, you guys know that we have been monitoring this tool, which has been very accurate, even though the probability does change on a regular basis depending on new data that comes out. But what we're seeing here is still a 98% chance of a Fed rate cut for tomorrow for 25 basis points. Now, the start of this Fed rate cut cycle is one of my key reasons why I am still bullish on crypto. Despite the recent crash down to, about 105,000, depending on what exchange you're viewing, okay? But we're basically have rebounded, okay? If you guys actually take a look into that huge crash candle there back on October 10th, we have basically retraced a lot of that huge wick there, right? Which, that's very important, right? We have retraced that entire wick drop there, okay? Not the entire body candle close, but the wick was the killer, okay? Now, what I'm looking at here for Bitcoin is that it is at a critical zone. And here's why that is. Okay, I talked about this huge rising wedge pattern here. Okay, that is bearish. Rising wedges are bearish and they have a higher chance of breaking to the downside. This one did, and the breakdown target would be about almost $80,000. Will Bitcoin actually get there? Well, right now it is at a critical zone because it is not uncommon to see a breakdown from a rising wedge pattern, and then the price action goes back to retest the bottom trend line before getting a rejection. So that is not what you want to see if you're a bull, okay? I am bullish on the markets. I am long on quite a bit of the altcoins here. I am looking to pick up Bitcoin when I have some dry powder at a better spot, okay, at an appropriate spot. But very important to see that Bitcoin does not get a rejection at this bottom trend line here for a bearish retest, okay? That could be anywhere from where we are at right now to about, you're just gonna have to track the bottom trend line here, anywhere to about even 122,000, okay? Of course, if we actually manage to get back above 126,000, of course, that is the all-time high, then things are going to start looking a lot more bullish. Now, do I think that is going to happen soon? I think we have a pretty good chance of that happening because of the Fed rate cuts. That is still my key argument. And let's take a look into a shorter time frame here for Bitcoin and see if we can get any clues on what could be happening here for Bitcoin. This is the daily time frame. We have reclaimed the daily 21 SMA. We're trying to get a solid establishment above the daily 50 SMA at about 114,000. We have not been able to close with the solid candle close above that moving average yesterday. Let's see if it does that today. Okay, let's take a look into the 3-day time frame. 3-day time frame, we're still trying to get a solid 3-day candle close as well above the 3-day moving averages, and we could say the same about the weekly moving average. Okay, So we're in that critical zone here where we're between moving averages that we can get above on as support and that bottom trend line of that bearish pattern. So let's go ahead and we're also going to be taking a look into a few pieces of news. I'm going to give you guys my instant reaction as well as a few altcoin setups, which would include Arweave, VRA, which is Veracity, as well as the third one is going to be Avantis, AVNT, and see what's happening in these markets. I'm going to show you guys the updates I'm seeing on these markets. Were their trading patterns and price targets still intact since the last time I've talked about them? What could be new happening with these altcoins on these charts? So let's go ahead and dive into the news first, and then we're going to take a look into altcoins. So this is by You Today. Michael Saylor on personal Bitcoin holdings. You do not sell your Bitcoin, quote unquote. Okay, so it's good to hear other bulls feeling the same way about your judgment on the market. Okay, now I do like to form my own opinions first before listening to others. It's nice to hear echoes of what you think, but I never really depend on others for their opinions. I think that's going to be that's not going to be good. In the end, you want to be able to form your own opinions, and I base that based on what I'm seeing here on the charts, okay? And then I listen to others and see if their argument makes sense. I listen to both sides, okay, just to keep an open mind. If you guys want to read more about this piece of news here, you guys can into the body of this text of this news. It is in TradingView. I do have a affiliate link in the description section below. If you guys sign up using my link, it does support my channel. There's a lot of resources that will help you become a more successful trader in TradingView. I do not recommend trading without TradingView, okay? I have been using it for the last 5+ years. I've been trading. Next is by You Today. Bitcoin could soar 40% in November. Price history reviews. Well, I mean, let's read a little bit into this, okay? October has been a brutal month this year for the crypto markets. Looking at the monthly candle, at least we're ending up in the green right now, and it looks like the bears may get a short squeeze here. Okay, I talked about that yesterday. Okay, of course, these are just my opinions, not financial advice. Like the entirety of this video, you guys gotta form your own opinions and strategies. But I showed you guys yesterday on the monthly chart why I think a short squeeze could be around the corner. But of course, we do have to break above that bottom trend line of that rise and wedge pattern. Okay, now let's see here. Bitcoin hitting a new all-time high at 126,000 ish at the beginning of it, only to set a low not seen since July, 102,000. Just a couple of days later, right now as October nears an end, I still do think there is a chance for a good October. I've seen some pretty crazy things that come out of FOMC meetings. Some major upside, of course, also volatility to the downside as well. But I think tomorrow is going to be a big event. And I think that's why people should be paying attention to what's happening in tomorrow's press conference. Right now, I am very long on the markets, right? But I am also risk managing effectively just to make sure that I am leveraged, right? So I don't get liquidated, right? I want to have comfortable margins and buffers for my leverage positions. But I do think that I personally am going to continue scaling into the markets and buying back some of my longs here after I see what happens in tomorrow's meeting and if it sounds good from tomorrow's meeting. So let's go ahead and go to the next piece here. Next piece is by You Today. XRP on the verge of do or die scenario versus Bitcoin. Bollinger bans signals. Well, I do think we're in a do or die situation for a lot of crypto here, all based on Bitcoin because of that scenario I talked about with you guys. And XRP, I think, that's gonna follow Bitcoin. I mean, I really think that when Bitcoin has more room to pump, that's gonna be good for a lot of altcoins, including XRP. And if Bitcoin dumps here, I really think do you, I'm really not sure that XRP is going to be spared. Okay, if Bitcoin starts dumping here, down to about 80, that's the 80,000 target. All right, next piece here is going to be interesting. It's going to be is by Cointelegraph. Bitcoin price taps 116,000 as analysis weighs odds of CME gap fill. So the CME gap fill this analyst is talking about is at about 111,000, which is still a pretty good way down. Okay, that's about a 4% drop for Bitcoin, and that's not going to look pretty for the altcoins here. But could we just wick down there to that gap? Let's see how often does the CME gap gets filled. Okay, I asked ChatGPT. Okay, so let's see here. Let's take a look into ChatGPT here. What is the CME gap? You guys can read a little bit about that. What I put into the question was, how often does BTC fill its CME gap? That is the key question. Okay, so how often do these gaps get filled, right? A short summary, a majority of CME gaps do get filled, but it's not 100%. And the time frame for fill can vary widely. So do we have to fill that 111,000 gap sooner or later? Because if it's later, then that means that we don't have to go down to revisit 111,000 anytime soon, right? Which could be good for the price action. However, if we do go down to 111,000, I do still think that's a reasonable area for support, and I'll point out to you guys why that is. I am looking at the 12-hour moving average, right? And even on the 12-hour time frame here, it does not look like we have a solid candle closes. We have solid candle closes above some of these 12-hour moving averages, okay? So it could still come down here to 12-hour 21 SMA, which is currently at about 111,000 to retest that moving average, right? Which was the resistance not too long ago, and it could come down there and retest that as support. So 111,000 is not completely out of the question anytime soon. Okay, so that is something I'm also looking at as well. And 111,000, even if we go all the way down there to revisit that, I would still say that Bitcoin would still look pretty bullish, and that's still good for the altcoins. Of course, if we start breaking some key levels below that, then I can update you guys on my opinion. And let's go ahead and take a look into altcoins now, right? Altcoins. Let's take a look into Arweave. Weekly time frame for Arweave here. This is what I've been talking about for quite some time. Falling wedge pattern, which is a bullish pattern that you guys should definitely pay attention to, because it tells you that after an extensive downtrend in that time frame, in this case would be a weekly time frame, it has been a very long one for a lot of these altcoins here. If you guys been here even since March of last year, you guys know what I'm talking about, okay? This one has not been, this has not been a straightforward bull cycle, not like 2021, okay? So Arweave, this is weekly time frame, falling wedge pattern, broke out of it back in July. Price target is about $39. It is still valid. This price action, this breakout, still valid because the price action is still above this upward trend line of this pattern it broke out from. Okay. We also have bullish divergence on the weekly time frame as well, where you have equal or lower lows, but you have equal or higher lows on the RSI. That tells you that there's going to be a higher chance of a bounce coming. Okay, let's see if Arweave, if that plays out for Arweave. Okay, now price targets, I want to mention that are estimates only. There could be more, there could be less. A lot of which does depend on what happens with Bitcoin. Okay, Nothing in this market is for certain, okay? And if Bitcoin starts dumping from here, these altcoin setups, they're not going to matter very much. Now, on the shorter time frame here, this is a potential cup and handle that is forming, right? There are rounded bottoms here on this time frame, and I talked about a falling wedge with you guys last time that broke out on this 4-hour time frame, and the price target for that is still valid, right? And this breakout still valid. It's about over $4.65 there, price target. Let's see if Arweave gets there. Let's see if it forms this cup and handle pattern scenario, because it's not formed yet. Now, I want to mention that even though falling wedges have a higher chance of breaking to the upside, they still have a smaller chance of breaking down. We're all just talking about probabilities here, okay? Nothing in this market is for certain. Always have to mind the downside risk. Let's go ahead and go to Veracity, which is VRA. Weekly time frame here. Falling wedge pattern on the weekly time frame. Now, like I said, this is going to be a very common theme. Price target for this falling wedge pattern, it broke out. It hasn't done too much. It's not uncommon to see a breakout of a falling wedge pattern and the price action could continue down lower. What's very important to monitor is to see if the price action and the breakout is still valid. And in this case, it is still valid because the price action is still above this upper trend line of the pattern it broke out from. Price target here is going to be about 1.5 cents price target for Veracity. It has also formed a smaller falling wedge pattern since it broke out, okay? Let's move this price target along this upper trend line here because it doesn't look like it's going to happen this week. So let's just say, for example, it happens by next week. For example, price target would be about 0.27 cents price targets, okay? Now, there are quite a bit of resistance along the way right now, including your weekly moving averages. That is, one of the key reasons why you see this price action continues downwards, okay? Because there's quite a bit of resistance above the price action, including your weekly moving average, 21 SMA, weekly 50 SMA, and if VRA manages to get above the shorter move price target, your weekly 200 SMA, the orange line. Let's go ahead and take a look into a smaller time frame, 4-hour time frame. I talked about a falling wedge with you guys. This one broke out later. And the price target here would be about 0.00094 about, okay? Let's see if Veracity can get there. Let's take a look into Avantis, which is AVNT. Talked about this with you guys. Let's take a look into a shorter time frame. I think that was where I said there was a falling wedge pattern, okay? Falling wedge pattern, price target for this one still valid, about $1.90. Avantis, it broke out of it back on October 13th. Since the breakout here, it has also formed a smaller falling wedge pattern that it broke out from to the upside, okay? And I think that basically met its target and some more out of that smaller falling wedge pattern. What could Avantis be doing right now? Avantis right now broke above the daily 21 SMA. It is trying to stay on top of it, okay? There is a bearish pattern here that you guys should be paying attention to because this is a rising wedge pattern. It works in the opposite direction of a falling wedge pattern, and it is bearish. Quite a bit of bearish divergence on this 4-hour time frame here. The breakdown target would be about 47.5 cents there. Let's see if Avantis could avoid this steep breakdown target. Okay, there's quite a bit of moving averages that could be acting as support, including your daily 21 SMA. So let's see what happens. And if you guys want to continue seeing any more of Avantis, VRA, or Arweave, make sure to drop a like, comment, subscribe, or any other coins in this market. I'll pick a request to you for you guys on a daily basis, and I'll see you on the next one.